Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive, especially to all our fellow finance enthusiasts over at the University of Lagos. I know you guys have exams coming up next month, so we thought we'd take a look at some key economic theories that might just give you an edge.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, those tough questions that always seem to pop up.
For sure.
We're going to be tackling two big ones today, the Harrod-Domar model and the Domar model.
Okay.
Both of these explore that dance between money investment and how economies grow.
And speaking of growth, we should probably start by getting super clear on what we even mean by economic growth.
Right, because it's more than just like GDP.
Absolutely. Especially thinking about a nation like Nigeria, economic growth is really about its potential to create more goods and services over time, more businesses, more jobs, and a better quality of life for everyone.
So it's about the future for you, all you finance professionals out there.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do we actually measure this growth? How do you make sure it's heading in the right direction?
That's where GDP comes in, gross domestic product. It's basically the total value of all the goods and services produced within Nigeria's borders. A rising GDP usually means a healthy, expanding economy.
Okay, got it. So let's jump into these models, starting with the Harrod-Domar model.
Right.
Now this one, it's all about trying to find that sweet spot for stable economic growth. What are the core principles behind it?
Well, the Harrod-Domar model really focuses on this balance between investment and savings. To simplify things, it makes a few assumptions like full employment, no government intervention, and a closed economy.
So it's like creating an economic lab.
Yeah, kind of. It's like setting up a controlled environment where we can study how investment and savings work together without all those other real-world factors.
Okay, but doesn't that make it kind of unrealistic? I mean, the real world's messy, right?
Of course, to some extent, yes. But models are always simplifications of reality. By making these assumptions, the Harrod-Domar model helps us isolate the key variables and see how they interact.
Okay, so how does all of this actually play out in the real world?
Well, the model introduces three growth rates: actual growth, warranted growth, and natural growth. Actual growth is simply the rate at which Nigeria's economy is currently growing, which we can see in changes in GDP.
Makes sense. Where do warranted and natural growth fit in?
Think of warranted growth as the ideal rate of growth needed to keep everyone employed and all resources being used. It's like walking a tightrope. Any deviation from this warranted growth path can lead to problems.
Okay, so actual growth needs to stay on track with this warranted rate to keep things stable.
Exactly. Now, natural growth, that's the maximum rate at which the economy can grow, given its resources and technology.
So kind of like a speed limit set by labor capital and natural resources.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so we've got these three rates: actual, warranted, and natural. What happens if they get out of sync?
That's where things can get a little tricky and potentially problematic.
How so?
Well, let's say, for example, the actual growth rate is faster than the warranted rate. This could lead to inflation because demand might start to outpace supply.
More money, chasing fewer goods, driving those prices up.
Exactly. And on the flip side, if the actual growth rate falls behind the warranted rate,
Uh-oh.
that could lead to unemployment. Businesses might not need to hire as many workers because demand is weaker.
So it's all about finding that balance, keeping those growth rates in harmony.
Precisely. Now, while the Harrod-Domar model is definitely important, it's not the only way to look at things. There's also the Domar model, which, it still focuses on investment, but it comes at it from a slightly different angle.
Interesting. Okay, so how does the Domar model view investment?
It highlights this idea of the dual role of investment.
Dual role.
Yeah. So on one hand, investment stimulates demand, puts money in the pockets of businesses and workers. Think of it like the classic Keynesian multiplier effect.
Right, so that spending keeps the economic engine running. But you said dual role, so what's the other part?
The second role is about increasing the economy's productive capacity. Investment creates new factories, better infrastructure, improved technology, all of which allow Nigeria to produce more in the long run.
So it's like planting a seed today to harvest more tomorrow.
Yeah, good analogy. So think about the debates going on in Nigeria right now about investing in roads, bridges, power grids. The Domar model suggests that these investments are absolutely crucial for long-term economic growth because they boost Nigeria's ability to produce.
Makes sense. So that's how those infrastructure projects tie into this model.
Exactly.
But wait, there's another concept in the Domar model that I found interesting, this idea of junking. What exactly does that mean?
Junking is when investments become obsolete or outdated before they've really had a chance to pay off, like a brand new factory suddenly becoming useless because of a new technology.
Ouch.
Yeah.
That's gotta hurt. Like buying a flip phone right before smartphones took over.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And that's a real risk that policymakers need to consider.
So how does junking affect economic growth then?
Well, imagine investing in a traditional power plant in Nigeria just before a big shift towards renewable energy. It diminishes the value of that investment and hinders overall growth.
So junking adds another layer of complexity to those investment decisions, especially with technology always changing.
Absolutely. It really highlights the importance of investing in flexible and adaptable technologies that can keep up with the times.
This is fascinating stuff. So the Domar model emphasizes this dual role of investment boosting demand and long-term production, while also keeping an eye out for junking risks.
Precisely. And it also lays out a key condition for achieving what's called steady state growth.
Steady state growth, what's that?
Steady state growth is where the economy is expanding at a constant rate without inflation or unemployment. It's about maintaining that balance between the savings rate and capital productivity.
Okay, so for Nigeria to achieve this sustainable growth, what would the Domar model suggest?
It points to policies that encourage saving and investing in things that actually increase productivity while also trying to reduce the risk of junking. It's all about making smart investment choices for long-term success.
And if those choices aren't so smart, if things get out of balance, what happens then?
That's when we can run into those problems of inflation and unemployment that we talked about earlier.
Right back to those economic imbalances.
Okay.
Okay, so we've looked at these two influential models, the Harrod-Domar and the Domar. Both of them shedding light on how money investment and economic growth are all connected. How do these two models connect? Are they totally separate ideas or do they kind of work together?
That's a great question, and it's one we'll explore right after this. We'll compare and contrast these models, looking at their similarities and differences, and discuss how they can help policymakers here in Nigeria.
Awesome. Stay tuned, University Lagos finance students. This deep dive into economic theory just might be the secret weapon you need to ace those upcoming exams. Welcome back, everyone. Before the break, we were really digging into the Harrod-Domar and Domar models, two really powerful frameworks for understanding how economies grow.
Right, they both really highlight just how important investment is, but they come at it from different angles.
So how do they compare? What are some of the key similarities and differences that our finance students at the University of Lagos should keep in mind for their exams?
Well, I think the most obvious similarity is that both models see investment as the driving force behind economic growth.
Okay.
They both acknowledge that you need savings to finance those investments.
Right, makes sense.
And they both stress the importance of finding that balance to avoid problems like inflation and unemployment.
So definitely some common ground there.
Yeah.
But where do they diverge? What makes them unique?
One of the biggest differences is their main focus, I'd say. The Harrod-Domar model is really concerned with creating the right conditions for stable growth. Like that tightrope walker we talked about, always trying to maintain balance.
Right.
The Domar model, though, while still concerned with stability, goes a bit deeper into the nuts and bolts of investment.
Okay.
It looks at how those investment choices impact both the overall demand in the economy and the ability to actually produce goods and services.
So the Domar model gives us a more detailed look at how investment actually works.
Yeah, exactly. And it brings in concepts like junking to show just how complex investment can be, especially with technology changing so rapidly.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But here's a question that's been on my mind. How relevant are these models today? I mean, they were developed decades ago. Are they really useful for policymakers in Nigeria who are dealing with a modern economy with all its complexities?
You know, it's funny because they're actually surprisingly relevant even in today's world.
Really? I'm not so sure about that. Explain it to me.
Yeah.
How can these models that seem kind of abstract offer any practical guidance for real-world policy decisions?
Okay, well, think about the economic challenges that Nigeria is facing right now. Things like high unemployment, those inflationary pressures, and the urgent need for better infrastructure. Both the Harrod-Domar and Domar models have something to say about how to deal with these issues.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So let's connect those dots. Give us some concrete examples of how these models can inform policy in Nigeria.
All right, well, the Harrod-Domar model reminds us that to get stable growth, you need that balance between savings and investment. Right. So for policymakers, this means creating policies that encourage people in Nigeria to save more, attracting foreign investment, and then making sure those investments go into sectors that will really boost the country's output.
So things like tax breaks for savings, making it easier to do business in Nigeria to attract those foreign investors,
Yeah.
and putting money into key areas like agriculture, manufacturing, And,
Yeah.
of course, infrastructure.
Exactly. Now, the Domar model adds another layer to this. It tells policymakers that when making investment decisions, they need to think about both the short-term effects on demand and the long-term effects on the country's capacity to produce. It's not just about creating jobs today, but also about making sure Nigeria can produce more goods and services tomorrow.
So that could mean investing in education and job training to make the workforce more productive, supporting research and development to drive innovation, and of course building those modern and efficient infrastructure projects to really support growth over the long haul.
Exactly. And remember, junking. That idea reminds policymakers to be forward-thinking, invest in technologies that can adapt to change. This could mean supporting renewable energy digital technologies, other sectors that are likely to grow in the future.
So it sounds like these models aren't just relics of the past. They're actually tools that can help us understand economic growth, the role of investment, and how policy decisions can shape these crucial factors. And this is super relevant for all of you listening at the University of Lagos. As future finance professionals, you'll be grappling with these issues.
Absolutely. These models provide a foundation for understanding how economic policies impact everything, from investment decisions to how fast an economy grows, and ultimately how people's lives are affected.
And for a nation like Nigeria, with its incredible potential but also real challenges, these insights are more crucial than ever. This deep dive has been really eye-opening even for me. But before we wrap up, I want to bring our listeners back into the conversation. Think about how these models could be applied to specific sectors of the Nigerian economy. Let's take agriculture, for instance. How could we use these ideas to come up with policies to boost how much food Nigeria produces and create jobs in rural areas?
That's a fantastic question, and one we'll explore in more detail after a quick break. We'll dig into some real-world applications of these models and see how they can guide those policy decisions in key sectors of the Nigerian economy.
Stick with us, folks. We'll be right back to connect these frameworks to the practical challenges and exciting opportunities facing Nigeria today. Welcome back to our deep dive into economic growth and all the theories that come with it. Before we went to break, we were talking about how those models we discussed, even though they were developed quite a while ago, still have valuable lessons for policymakers here in Nigeria.
Yeah, and we asked you all to think about how those models might apply to specific sectors like agriculture.
Right, because it's one thing to get these concepts in theory, but it's another to actually see how they work in the real world.
Exactly. So let's use agriculture in Nigeria as a case study. It's a sector with huge potential, but it's also facing some big challenges.
Okay, so paint us a picture. What's the current state of agriculture in Nigeria?
Nigeria has a ton of land that could be used for farming and a large workforce. But compared to other countries, productivity is still pretty low.
So lots of potential, but not living up to it. Why is that?
There are a bunch of factors: limited access to modern farming techniques, not enough infrastructure for storage and transport, and it's hard for small farmers to get the financing they need.
Yeah, those are some pretty big obstacles.
Yeah.
So how can our economic models, the Harrod-Domar and the Domar, help us find solutions?
Well, the Harrod-Domar model reminds us that to get sustainable growth in agriculture, you need that balance between investment and savings.
Right, because you need money to invest in things like better seeds, equipment, irrigation.
Exactly. So policymakers could focus on finding ways to encourage savings in rural communities, maybe through microfinance programs or cooperatives.
So giving local communities the power to invest in their own agricultural development.
Precisely. And attracting foreign investment in agribusiness can also be a big help. But it's really important to make sure those investments benefit local farmers and communities, not just big corporations.
Sustainable and inclusive growth. That's a key point. Now, how does the Domar model fit into all of this?
The Domar model focuses on that dual role of investment, right? Boosting demand in the short term and increasing how much the economy can produce in the long term. When it comes to agriculture, that means investing in projects that create jobs and give farmers more income now, while also setting things up for more productivity down the road.
Can you give us some examples? What kind of investments would do both of those things?
Investing in rural infrastructure is a perfect example. Building better roads so farmers can get their products to market, improving storage facilities to cut down on waste, developing irrigation systems to increase crop yields.
So those investments would have benefits across the whole agricultural system.
Exactly. They'd create jobs in construction and transportation. They'd help farmers earn more by making it easier to sell their products, and they'd lead to a more productive and resilient agricultural sector overall.
Okay, infrastructure is key. What other investments fit that Domar model of short-term and long-term benefits?
Investing in research and development is huge. Developing crops that can survive droughts, improving livestock breeds, finding new ways to increase yields. These all contribute to long-term gains in productivity.
Because investing in knowledge and innovation always pays off eventually.
Absolutely. And we can't forget about education and training for farmers. Giving them access to modern farming techniques, financial literacy programs, and entrepreneurial skills can really empower them to make better decisions, manage their farms more effectively, and adapt to a changing world.
So it's not just about physical infrastructure, but also about investing in people in the agricultural sector. This is all making a lot of sense. By using these models, we can get past vague ideas about helping agriculture and start to think about targeted strategic actions that can really make a difference. Thinking about all our listeners at the University of Lagos, I bet they're wondering, okay, this is great, but how does this actually translate into real-world policy decisions?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Imagine you're an economic advisor to the Nigerian government. You've got all these models at your disposal, and you're tasked with designing policies to boost agricultural production and improve the lives of people in rural communities. What would you do?
That's a tough but exciting challenge. Let's put on our policymaker hats and brainstorm. First, we've got to prioritize those investments in rural infrastructure, roads, storage irrigation, all the things we've been talking about.
Absolutely. And those investments can come from a mix of public and private sources. The government can allocate money in the budget, look for partnerships with international organizations, and create incentives for private investors to get involved.
Great. Next, I think we need to set up development banks specifically designed for small farmers, offering loans with good terms and providing technical support.
I completely agree. Access to financing is a huge barrier for a lot of farmers, so having institutions that understand their needs is really important.
And let's not forget about research and development. We need to invest in agricultural research institutes, encourage partnerships between scientists and farmers, and create extension services to get new technologies and best practices out to the farmers who need them.
Couldn't agree more. Investing in innovation is key to making agriculture more productive and resilient to things like climate change and pests.
And to top it all off, we need to invest in education and training for farmers. Give them the knowledge and skills to succeed in a modernizing agricultural sector.
That's essential. Empowering farmers through education is the foundation for sustainable and inclusive growth in agriculture.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today. We started with these seemingly abstract economic models, but we've shown how they can provide valuable insights into real-world problems and guide us towards real solutions.
Exactly. Those models aren't just theoretical ideas, they're powerful tools to help us understand how economies work, how investments fuel growth, and how policy choices can shape the future for individuals, communities, and entire nations.
This deep dive has been an incredible journey, and I hope everyone listening, especially those of you at the University of Lagos, getting ready for exams, are feeling more confident about tackling these complex economic ideas. But remember, this is just the beginning. The world of economics is vast and always changing. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and never stop learning.
Well said.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and best of luck on those exams.